I would like to welcome you all back to the IE427 garage. Today we're back on the 25th anniversary car. If you look back over in the corner there, you can see from the last episode that we're in the process of getting Michael's car out of here and over to the upholsterer. And it's going to probably get loaded on to the trailer tomorrow or the day after tomorrow and head down to upholstery. And so what that means for us is we get to go back and start working on the 25th anniversary car. Now, some work has taken place on the 25th anniversary car in the midst of getting Michael's car off to paint. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get you all caught up here really quick. So we have been working on foot boxes and cockpit aluminum. And so I will walk you around and show you how we chose to finish off all of these different panels. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to start at the front of the car where all of the foot boxes start to come together. And I think what you're going to see is you're going to see why we go through the meticulous process of pre-fitting these panels before we send them to powder coat when given the opportunity. Again, these powder coated panels came this way from Factory 5. So even though some of the trunk panels and those were bare aluminum, the owner chose to have those powder coated to match. The majority of all of the engine side cockpit panels and some of the interior cockpit panels came pre-powder coated from Factory 5. So we had to do what we had to do. We had to fit them after they had already been powder coated. So with that, let me turn you around here and we'll kind of show you what we have going here. I'm also going to, I think I'm going to grab the big light up here because this one is just going to be a little bit brighter for what we need to do. Let's see if it'll stay there. Yeah, it'll stay there. Okay, now you're going to see exactly why it is we take as much time meticulously fitting these panels as we do. The time you spend fitting the panels before you actually silicone and pop rivet them into place will make your end product that much better. So here, for instance, this is pretty common for everybody to pop rivet these from the outside. I mean, it's pretty much a given. They're going to be harder to drill, pop rivet, and place from the inside of the panels. But how about these panels down here? It's way easier to send these in from the inside. But you can see by doing it this way, when you're at, for instance, a car show and someone's standing over on the passenger side of the car, granted, you can have an engine in the engine bay, but if they're up at this angle right here and looking down, you're going to see those rivets. And how much nicer is it having those rivets with the flat-headed side of them, the pretty side of them, facing the engine compartment versus facing the interior of the car. The interior of the car gets covered with heat and sound mat and carpet and all that other stuff. So it doesn't matter which side you put on there, right? So you're going to see we did the same thing over on this side. They're not as visible over on this side because we're so close to them, but you can see down in here and along there, we got all those in and they're nice and clean. Now, one thing I'm going to point out is you can see there's an access hole right there. That is actually for the donor build wiring. The way the 87 through, what was it, 93 Mustang were wired, the easiest path to the back of the car was through that channel on the side of the the cockpit. And so that hole has remained through all the iterations of the Mark series Roadster, all the way from the Mark 1 to the Mark 4. Factory 5 does give you a cover plate for it, and I'll show you how we took care of that on the inside. But notice there's no rivets on it. It's just nice and clean and nothing exposed on it. Now I could have riveted it in from the transmission, you know, the inside of the transmission tunnel into the cockpit, but I found that it's just easier to put that in with some silicone adhesive and some foil tape on the inside. It makes it really clean, and by the time we put the heat and sound mount and the carpeting over it, it's gonna be awesome. All right, so here we are on the passenger side of the car, and if you've noticed, in these areas that we know we're going to be covering up all of these rivets, we've switched over to just the standard aluminum rivets. It just doesn't make sense and justify the cost of black rivets in places where we're going to be covering them up. So all of these are just silver rivets, and you can see what we did is we just made lines on the inside with a silver marker, figured out our spacing, and we went ahead and went to town with the rivets. Now in some places you're going to find that the rivets themselves simply don't have the strength to pull the panel down into position. So right here you can see we've got one of the number 8. They're actually a 1/4 inch self-drilling hex-headed not machine screw, tech screw that we're using to pull the panel down in the back. Now that will get replaced with a rivet eventually, but until the silicone adhesive has had a chance to dry, that will stay in place. We did it both on this side and on the other side of the car, and when I get over to the driver's side I'll show you how that one ended up. As you're going down on the transmission tunnel, you can see that this panel is actually bowed in. Now if you're not careful when you place this panel, you're going to find that your rivets break off, the shaft on them break off far sooner than you want them to, and they don't suck the panel down flat with the surface of the chassis. And so what we do is we start up here at the top and we'll place a rivet, and then you can actually hold it in with your thumb against the frame member until you get the first probably 3 or 4 rivets down. By the time you get down to about here, it's going to be beyond the point that you can actually apply enough pressure with your hand and pull the rivet tight so that the panel is tight to the chassis. So what I end up doing then is I actually use one of those number 8 self-drilling screws. I'll place it 1 screw away, or a hole away, and I'll suck that panel in here and then come back and place the previous rivet. And then I'll move that screw from this point down to this point and then put that rivet in, and so on. So as you can see, this panel has a pretty good bow to it. But as you look inside, the other side right here, you can see how tightly we've gotten that to suck into the panel, to where the only part it's away from the chassis is at the very bottom. And what that's going to do is it's going to give you more room in the actual cockpit. Now we're talking, you know, 1/4 of an inch and half of an inch, but trust me, it matters. It matters in points like this when you're trying to get heat and sound map behind the seat harness tab. Normally, if you just pulled this rivet in to where it broke off and didn't get this thing to suck in tight against the chassis, you wouldn't have this gap here to actually get your heat and sound mat in there. And so it enables you to get your heat and sound mat in there, and even tuck carpeting in behind there. Now we're still going to have to drill through this seat harness mount through the aluminum, and we're going to have to put a hole on the other side with a hole saw that's big enough for both a washer and a nut, because we don't want to tighten that panel. Now that we've pulled the panel tight against the chassis, we don't want to pull it back the other way with a washer and a nut when we go ahead and we put our seat harness belts in. So we'll open that hole up big enough that both the washer and the nut will go through. But once the carpeting and everything else are in the car too, it's going to help to seal off that hole that we've made in the side. The back trunk portion, or the upper trunk portion, is already installed. We know that we're not going to have to do a whole lot of work underneath here. The fuel lines, the fuel filter, the electrical harness, the chassis harness for the rear of the car are easily accessible up in behind here. So if you've got your suspension in and you've got your brake lines run, then you're ready to put this panel on. There's no reason to wait any longer. You can put this panel in, because this panel has to go in before the back cockpit wall goes in. And so I like to get this panel in just as soon as I can, as soon as I'm ready for it. And you can see here, same thing, we've got the silver rivets in here because we know we're going to be covering this with heat and sound mat and carpeting. So we're not too concerned about the black rivet heads. I really believe that the orientation of the panels, especially in the cockpit, the front of the cockpit, the tunnel, the lower tunnel piece that makes the lower firewall, is a very critical piece. And the way it's shown in the assembly manual, and the way 90% of the people out there install it, is they install that piece first. I like the overlap so that all of the seams, the parts that you're going to see, end up getting covered up. And I think it makes it look nicer from the engine side of the aluminum. So you can see here that, for instance, this is that piece. This is the lower firewall, and you can see that the overlap tab is on the inside here. And we've got the same thing here on the tunnel side. The overlap tab is on the inside here. And notice how these rivets come in from the other side. They come in from the transmission tunnel interior portion, because, like I said, you can see those from the engine compartment. And I just think everything looks nicer if you can conceal the ugly side of the rivet heads. So I didn't point it out on that side, but you can see all of this right here. We've got the ugly side facing in. And then you can see how we went ahead and put that patch panel in here. We put a small band of black silicone adhesive around the outside of it, and then 2 strips of foil tape hold it from the inside. And now once that silicone's dry, it is dry because we did this days ago, that panel's never going to come off. We're going to go ahead and we're going to cover this with heat and sound mat anyway, and then it's going to get carpeting. So we're going to be fine, and nobody's ever going to see that. And from the other side, if anybody ever views the car from the bottom of the car, it's going to look like it's a finished piece. One other thing that I want to point out is you're going to have areas like up here where the panel does not fit all the way against the bottom of the chassis, and there's no tab to pop rivet on the bottom. So what we tend to do in places like this is we'll probably come back on that one, and we'll probably seal that with some of the black silicone. We'll tape off the other side, and we'll make it nice and neat from the engine side. And then this is all hidden from the inside, and so you're not going to see it, but we'll still do a good job to make everything nice and neat here on the inside as well. And then the heat and sound mat will come up right to the bottom of it and seal off that area nice and tight, and it'll be good. Okay, and you can see right here on the driver's side, we did the same thing. We've got a self-tapping screw right here at the back, and that's simply to suck this piece down so we get it nice and flat, so that when the back cockpit wall goes in, it will sit flat. So before that back cockpit wall goes in, we'll pull that self-drilling screw out. We'll fit the back cockpit wall and make it fit just the way we want it to. We'll do the same thing we did on that lower firewall piece, making sure that we like the way the panels overlap here for the piece here to the back wall of the cockpit, and make sure the orientation of the panels is the way we like it. So what this does is it ends up pulling the panel down flush so that everything else from the top is going to sit where it's designed to. If you just left that, what happens is there's just a little bit of differential in the actual chassis here, especially if you don't take into account the weld that joins the back upper piece to the 4-inch tube. And the screw in there just helps to get it all down to the right level. Now, what we've been working on today and last evening is the driver's side of the footbox. So this panel goes right here. Once it's in place, everybody kind of knows what it is because it's got this bump out in it. I like to do this out of the car rather than in the car for two reasons. One, I leave these side panels off until the very end, right before the body goes back on the car, because it makes getting into the footboxes, both on the passenger side and the driver's side, so much easier. And then two, it's easier to get this portion, this bump out portion of this all mocked up when it's out of the car, because I like to actually rivet this in the same manner that I do the panels on the front of the engine compartment. As I said, sometimes I'm doing it more for looks, like the inside of the engine compartment. We're doing that for looks. We want to get those rivet heads facing the right way, so that when you're looking in at a car show or something like that and you see those aluminum panels and how they come together, you want the pretty side of the rivet. On that panel, on that driver's side footbox cover for the side, I'm actually going to run the rivets the other way, because in that case what I want, because those pieces are so small that are going in there for both the carpeting and the heat and sound mat, I want the smooth side of the rivet so that I can get the heat and sound mat to sit flat in there, because on a small piece like that, if you're trying to fight the hump of the ugly side of the rivet, the pull side of the rivet, what happens is you end up having to score the heat and sound mat and kind of get it to form around the rivet. And it's not a big deal when you've got a lot of square inch coverage, like on a panel where you're just at the edge. But on a little piece, there are some little pieces here. So imagine this little strip that's on the inside of heat and sound mat. If we start putting slices and cuts in that in order to make it fit into the piece as we're installing it, we're going to end up with a bunch of tiny little pieces. And a bunch of tiny little pieces have less of an adhesive property than a larger piece. And so it's just going to make more sense, since this ends up out here and is covered with the body, that we put the rivets going out the other way. So, like I said, sometimes it's function, sometimes it's form. And you're going to have to decide which is more important to you at any particular given time. Because if you get caught up on doing it the same way every time, it may end up biting you in the ass, and you may have real trouble when you go to put your heat and sound mat, or if you're, let's say you use lizard skin or one of those spray-on type thermal barriers. Well, now you've just prolonged the agony until you get to carpeting. So I think if you stand back and look at each situation a little bit beforehand, you'll have an easier time making a decision as far as which way is the best going to be to pop rivet, silicone, and adhere all of your panels to the chassis. All right, last thing I wanted to get to today was that we did get some deliveries to the shop over the past couple of weeks. And one of those deliveries was from our buddy Russ Thompson. Russ is up in Northern California, and he makes these beautiful turn signal switches. I'm sure you saw the video on Michael's car where we replaced the switch on the end of the stock with a latching switch to activate the high beam and low beam. And so this car owner decided that this was something that he wanted on his car. So when he first dropped the car off, we went ahead and we pulled the hub that he had for the steering off, and we sent it with him. And once he got home, he sent that to Russ. Russ manufactures that piece using your existing hub from the steering assembly from Factory 5, but he puts 2 notches in it, or 2 tangs. And what those 2 tangs do is they act as the self-canceling mechanism on the switch, and then it fits nicely in that package that that Russ puts together. The other things that we did get here this past week were some of the fuel system components. A lot of the stuff with the complete kit and the fuel injection upgrade, which I think is part of the Coyote upgrade. But, you know, those of you that have ordered these, I don't order the kits. So keep that in mind. I usually get the kits after they've been ordered. So some of the stuff comes with the fuel injection upgrade that Factory 5 offers, and I don't know whether that's part of the Coyote kit or whether it's separate, but I know that we got a fuel pump and a fuel pump hanger as part of that. We also got some fittings and some nylon braided lines, but the nylon braided lines that we got, I wasn't comfortable with, because one, they're pre-cut, and you know, even if you go exactly by the book on a Factory 5 build, I found that a lot of the stuff has excess, and I really, you know, we really want to go for a higher level of build quality than just having excess hose strapped, you know, back at the fuel tank. We want everything to be run nice and clean and no excess. So what I had the car owner do is we put together a parts order. Of course, you can see some of this stuff. It's all, you know, it's from Summit Racing. But we ordered some 3/8 stainless line, and we're going to put that in our tubing straightener. And we're going to make both a fuel feed and return out of 3/8 stainless. And then we got an assortment of flare nuts. I think this is a male to male and connector. We have a tube adapter. This is for a fuel line. So this would be like at the fuel rail. More tube nuts. We got some more male connectors. Another adapter. Oh, you know what? These adapters are actually at the tank. And then we should have some, there should be some tube nuts in here somewhere. I think we either got short of the tube nuts or I didn't put them on the list. Anyway, so if we're short, we'll get those. Not a big deal. I can actually pick those up locally too. But we also got a fuel filter. This one is from TrickFlow, and I believe TrickFlow's fuel filters are actually made by Aeromotive. The difference is this one kind of fit the color scheme of the car a little bit better than the red Aeromotive one that we would normally use. And granted, guys, it's not going to be seen. It's going to be tucked, you know, up in here. It's actually going to go right in here somewhere. But, you know, if you're going to build from this point, you know, you're going to build from scratch, you might as well make all the parts and pieces as nice as you possibly can, so that when you come down to the end, you're not saying, oh man, I don't have anything red on the car, and I've got this stupid fuel filter that's red. So with that, I think I'm going to close out this video. I just wanted to make sure that we got all caught up on the 25th anniversary car, because work has been going on it. I just haven't been filming a whole lot of it because my priority was to get Michael's car to paint, and now to get Michael's car over to the upholsterer. So with that, I want to thank you guys all for watching. If you are enjoying the content, please do the like, the share, the subscribe, and all that good stuff. And we will look forward to seeing you guys next time. Have a great day.